The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.
Welcome to Honest Money. I'm Warren Ingram.
I'm Pieter Villiers.
This is the last episode in our series about the people in the final stages of their career. So this is the age 50 to 65. I think today's one is really around almost the broader considerations, the things that you should be thinking about, planning ahead, but maybe they don't fit into a neat tax calc or a spreadsheet or a detailed kind of estate plan. But it's the stuff that makes or breaks the quality of your retirement, after this stage.
Yes, and we've covered debt in the first episode. In the second one, we talked about investments. The third one, tax and estate planning. So we kind of touched on all the technical stuff, and today we're just going to revisit some of those concepts, but more talk about the psychology around those decisions. And that's more often than not the one that's more important or more focused on influencing the way we make decisions. It's actually understanding the stuff behind the numbers, which is always important. So I think maybe to start off, one of the big things that I see is people have built a family, there's kids in the house, kids on out of the house, and they're sitting in this big shell of a house, a home, where it's maybe the partner, the couple, or maybe one of them unfortunately passed away, and it's now this single person in this big house, where once it was filled with a lot of children running around, breaking stuff and laughter, and now it's almost like this empty shell of a place. No, that's a bit of a more like a morbid picture to paint, but it's often a reality of you've lived in the space that was appropriate for where you were, and now the decision kind of stays with: do I stay here? Do I continue paying because it's quite expensive? Probably the levies, the rates, all of that. Or do I downsize and sell the house and maybe move to a smaller place that's more appropriate for me? Maybe move to another location that's more closer towards retirement. But how do we approach that type of decision? Because it's a big one, right? It's a big decision to sell a house. Not only the financial attachment, but also the emotional attachment we have to this house that became a home. That was kind of like it represents most of your life.
Yeah.
How do we face that tough call?
I mean, I think you do it in a couple of ways. One, what's the purpose of the house in this stage of life and the next stage of life? So ask yourself that question. It played a fantastic role. If you're a parent and you raised your children there, and it delivered on that role. What will it do for you into the future? So history is important. We shouldn't forget our history, but we shouldn't be bogged down and live in history. Yeah. So, and living in a big kind of family home and staying there only for history where it drags you down financially, that doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of people do that without having a clear conversation, either with themselves as a couple or with their children.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, and I think we should add holiday houses to that. So. I can't tell you how many times I'd meet the parents and they'd say, no, well, we've got the holiday house at the coast, or we've got the family home, and my kids would be so upset if I sold that. And then you bring the adult children into the conversation, and potentially those children live in a different city or a different country. And you say to them, what will you do with that family house or the holiday house when mom and dad have died? And almost inevitably, the answer is, oh, we'll sell it. So then you look at the parents and you say, okay, so for the next 5, 10, 30, 35 years, you're going to take money and actually almost throw it away for something that's historical. And your kids don't have the same attachment to the future. They've got a historical attachment to it. It's great. You've done well. But don't stay in the house for someone else's benefit. You stay in the house because it serves purpose for you. If it doesn't serve a purpose for you, then it is time to sell that asset. So 2 things. One, be clear what the purpose of that big house is, and if it doesn't fulfill a purpose, and you can move into something that's better suited to your stage of life now and into the future, then it's a good time to do it. And you should do it from the front foot. A lot of the time, people will leave that decision too long and too late. That they don't have the energy or the money to maintain the house gets run down, then they sell at a heck of a discount. So that doesn't make sense. Or equally, that you just get to resent the house because you're mowing that flipping big lawn, cleaning that huge pool that you don't go into anymore, and getting on the roof to clean the blessed gutters that just get blocked up all the time. And so it's a chore rather than a joy. And then secondly, have the conversation with your children. If you're doing this for the children's benefit, one very nice way to say is, okay, great. You are now as children earning good money, and the holiday house on the coast gets repainted every 5 years. So I'm handing responsibility both for it to happen and financially to you guys, and then see how much they love the holiday house, because we all love a free holiday.
Yeah.
And if you've got lots of money, fine, that's a great call. But actually, if we're talking about the difference between you having a decent, comfortable quality of retirement and not, for your children's benefit, then you've got to make them part of the solution as well as the problem. So I think it's a lot of the time it's about being clear with yourselves and the others in your life, and then saying, okay, now I make a sensible, rational decision for me. What I would just be careful of, you mentioned, for example, the classic, you have a big corporate life and a corporate career in Joburg, and then for the last sort of 10 years of your working career, you want to go to the coast. Why? Because you've had very great 10-day holidays there. And then you do come to the coast and you realize that, winter lasts like 11 months of the year, except that 1 month when you come down.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's not so much fun anymore. And actually you've got no friends there and all of those things. So what I would say is, if you're going to make that transition, then be careful of buying the future property without doing the homework, but without saying, okay, actually, I'm going to go and spend a year living there through all the seasons of a year. And yes, I'm happy to be there. And yes, I can make friends and build my social capital. So I think the property decision is quite complex. And I would be very careful to make the new decision. I'd be happy to rent for a time. But I would be fast to sell if I have a big property that's actually not fulfilling a purpose anymore.
Very good point. So yeah, you really have to, at this point, make a decision based on your current reality. And I think what makes it difficult is the decision doesn't depend on one person to make. It's like you said, it's probably you owning the house, but it has had an influence on other family members as well in the past. And we need to try and understand what the future will look like and what their expectations are, because often those are misaligned, because a conversation just have never been had on it. And once you really understand, they're self-sufficient, they're actually going to live overseas, no point in really keeping that holiday home for hopefully once every 5 years that they might visit, and might not even go there because they've got other people that they might also want to visit. So it's at a point in life where you can start focusing on yourself a little bit and to understand, I'm getting closer to my retirement. The decisions I make now is very important financially, and I don't want to throw money in the water unnecessarily, because I now need to make sure I make good choices, and this could become potentially quite a big money sink. And if you do sell your house, a bigger house, and you move into a smaller place, also do your homework on that, because it's been a while since you last bought a house, maybe. And the surprising thing that I saw, personally, like I grew up in Potchefstroom, and we had quite a nice house, a big house there for our family. We were 6 members. And then when we were all graduated out of university, my mom had to move to Cape Town, and we sold the house, and it almost only were able to fund half of the smaller house that we could buy in Cape Town because of the different demographics, different price points. So always do your homework there, run the numbers as well. It's not, don't just assume you're selling a big house and you're going to buy a smaller house and then you're going to have a lot of money to invest. That might not be the case, because it's different demographics, especially if you move to the coast. Coastal areas are by nature more expensive. So making an informed decision and deciding around the emotional side of the attachment and the logical side of what makes sense now and in the future. Adding to that, whilst we're on the topic of kids, a big reality for a lot of people now are people my age, so kind of that 25 to 35, 40, are moving abroad, working overseas. They got great opportunities, earning well. But now the parents are still in South Africa. And at this point in life, you probably have decided where you're going to settle in the future. Most likely in South Africa if you've got a lot of interest here, but your kids are overseas. How do we navigate that dynamic? Because that now changes the game quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, you don't just double the complexity, you probably quadruple the complexity because the reality with those adult children over there is that they never quite make the call to say, listen, we're definitely here, we're never coming back.
Yeah.
So then the parents live in this betwixt and between world forever. And so I think, a couple of things. One, in a way, you've done your job. Your job as a parent is to give flight to your children and leave them, with as many tools as possible to live the life they want to live.
Yes.
And so it is okay, and actually a little bit encouraged to start becoming a little bit selfish. So do the things that suit you first, and don't live for your children. You've done your job, and they are on their way. And so, for example, we've just spoken about property, but all the other assets that you have, if you need those assets to fund your lifestyle, then that's okay. Don't keep setting aside money and potentially, for example, over investing overseas because your kids live there and you want them to inherit overseas money, but then you don't have enough to live on in South Africa. So it's about now taking care of yourself correctly and making sure that you've got the quality of life. And then saying, okay, there is a chance that that I will leave money behind to the next generation. If that's the case, and you're 55 and you've got 10 years of work left, you might then say, well, let's understand the tax consequences for me putting aside money for my children, but secondly, for my children to receive it. And you do need to be very careful here because, for example, you might say, well, intergenerational planning, trust is the best thing to do. That's fine until you get to some jurisdictions. I think Australia's one, Israel's another. I think even to the US, where maybe a trust is not the best thing at all. In fact, it could be the worst thing that you do.
Yeah.
So you might do what you think is phenomenal estate planning, and actually it ends up doing the exact opposite of what you intended. So I think that's why the complexity is tricky, because if you've got children living in Dubai, the likelihood is they're not going to retire in Dubai, and so and they might not know where they want to go. So I think building up overseas assets because your children are overseas, yes, that makes sense. Chucking it all into a trust where you're paying $2,000 to $5,000 a year or more, and then finding out after 15 years that all of that money was wasted because they're in a jurisdiction that doesn't recognize trusts, would be a terrible waste. So I think it's about being clear with your kids to say, well, do you have an idea of where you're going? So if you're in Dubai, where are you going next? No, we don't know. Okay, well then I'm going to invest overseas. So we get global exposure, we do a bit of rand hedging, and then we all agree that it might end up that you've got estate duty.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because that's a possibility as opposed to a certainty where you pay $5,000 a year for a trust. Expenses day one, it limits the growth of the investments, and then there's no benefit on the trust because they did end up in a jurisdiction that doesn't recognize. So I'm always careful with those next steps. So yes, get the overseas allocation correct, but again, it's about being very clear with your kids, and you've got to have a proper conversation. It's almost like a family meeting. Don't just do it, by the by, like at the end of the Sunday evening phone call. Hey, like, where are you guys going next? I mean, they've got to. I would say to them, like, this is why we're doing this. Please have a think about it, and then do we agree on what our next strategy is?
Yeah.
And if they're not clear, then build in flexibility. Structures are great, but structures create inflexibility.
Yes.
Very hard to unwind a trust, and very expensive. So then rather say, well, I'm a little bit tax inefficient from a future estate duty point of view, but maximum flexibility now. And I always, maybe that's my flaw, is I would rather deviate to more flexibility than more structure, because I can make decisions later.
Yeah, very important. And this ties back into our discussion in the second episode on flexibility in retirement and having capital available for these things. Because it might be that they are overseas and the young couple newly married, and now there's a kid, the baby, and now Opa Oma wants to go visit the baby. Now it's much more expensive for you from South Africa to go to any country, basically, because of our weakening rand. But it's very expensive to go to your developed countries, and it's most often the case. It's going to the UK, the Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. Those are popular destinations, and that's something to take into account. If you know that potentially your kids will stay overseas and you want to visit them, it's part of your retirement planning to be done. And what I sometimes, if we do planning, we kind of increase the expected percentage of the increasing cost of these expenses. And if you think about something in the hard currency, you need to factor in the inflation differences as well. So, for example, if our cost in South Africa for holidays is increasing by 5% per year, probably it's going to be more. Overseas, it might be more like 7 or 8% because the rand has a higher inflation rate than offshore money. So that's something to also think about your retirement planning ahead when you still have the capacity to invest, because that is a big reality and it's going to be a big expense for you at that point in time. But it's also a quality experience for you to have, to be present for your grandkids, even though they might be in an overseas country. It's something you don't want to rob yourself from if you could potentially make that possible. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to do that every year necessarily, but still, it's something you now still have time to almost create that buffer, that possibility to make that happen. And kids can always visit here, but again, they've got a bigger family. It's also expensive for them to come. So.
Well, back to the big house question, because one of the interesting things there is, you going to visit them in their shoebox in London, that's quite hectic. And so you might say to them, look, I'll cover the flights. You guys come out because, we can all have space, and, you get to see a bit of sun and stay out of the rain so you can dry out a bit. And when you go back to the UK, we've all had a nice holiday and we're not all in each other's space. So you can plan differently. And I mean, I remember, when my father was living in Dubai, I'd said to him, look, that's not a place for holiday for me, I can tell you. So why don't we meet midpoint? We go somewhere else. So you can, when you've got international kids, you can, or in my case, international parents, you can plan differently. So you say, yes, my expenses are higher because I'm traveling more, but it's also part of my holiday.
Yeah.
And so it's again about creating the flexibility to do that. I want to just jump to maybe a little bit of life planning, because one of the things I see with it happens to people that have very demanding careers, especially if you've got a big title and it's very prestigious, or you're an entrepreneur, or you see it maybe, the medical specialists and the medical professionals where they've got hugely demanding careers and they operate, ridiculous hours, etc. And then almost on a day it stops. And, they've defined themselves by their career, by their, I'm not saying their title, but by their career and by the job that they do. And then the next day they don't have that. And for, it's part of the trauma we've spoken about in previous episodes of trauma of retiring. And so, at this stage, while you're working towards that, if you are one of those people in a hugely demanding career, the challenge to give yourself is, what are the things you're going to do? Let's say you say, okay, at 63, I'm stopping. Well, I know what you're going to do for the first 3 months. You're going to go and do all the holidays and whatever it is that you've been planning to do that you never had the time to do. That's great. And let's say it's 3 months later and you set aside the budget. Financially, it was a good call. On the first week after your holidays are done, what are you going to do? And you need to picture that life. You actually need to almost like have a diary and say, well, and my suggestion is somewhere around 3 fixed appointments that you have to have in your diary every week. And I don't mean fixed appointment at the coffee shop with your mate. That's also nice to do. And I don't mean playing golf, every Tuesday because that's pensioners' day. I'm talking about things that have purpose, that have meaning. So what are you going to do? For example, do you donate some of your time to a charity? Do you join the club that I'm using golf as if you and I have anything to do with golf, but are you now going to join the golf committee and actually donate your time and your expertise to that? Or are you, not my favorite thing to do, but do you join the homeowners association where you live or whatever it is? But the school governing body, or whatever it is that you want to do. But you've got to make sure that there are things that you are obliged to do that give you purpose and meaning, that are important to you. They don't necessarily have to be revenue generating, although I don't mind that idea. When you hit 65, you've got, lots of brains, lots of energy, lots of experience, and now a surfeit of time. And so, kind of saying to somebody or a company or whatever, look, I'm happy to come in and do, 1 or 2 days a week, even if it's for half a day at a time, to share expertise or give you guys time or flexibility. And, you do that at a reduced salary, like it's quite meaningful. That could be the most fun you have, because if they treat you badly, you tell them where to go, and you don't need their money. But you've got to make a plan.
Yeah.
And I find that that's a lot of the time when I speak to executives, they don't see that. They find that a very difficult thing to do. And then there's the triple D. When you start retirement: death, divorce, depression. And so what we're telling you here, this episode, is about making sure that those three things don't happen.
Yeah.
And so, the divorce thing is about, if you are married and you're going in, you're like heading into retirement, is to say, what are we going to do? How do we each spend our time? Because I promise you, if your spouse wasn't working, the last thing your spouse wants is you sitting at home every day looking at them saying, okay, it's time for you to entertain me. It's about, how do we spend our time together, but how do we do the things that are important and meaningful to us individually as well? So it's planning that life, having conversations.
Yeah.
The depression is the antidote to depression is the things that you do that have meaning. Making sure that you're investing in your social capital, making sure that you've got good friends and a community that will keep you active and that will engage you. Join a hiking club, join a walking club. If you must, join a bowls club or the golf club or whatever it is, but make sure that you've got meaningful engagement from people. And the death thing is about making sure that you don't let your health suffer leading into retirement. Make sure that you actually start, increasing your exercise and taking care of that stuff. Because funny thing about the human body, I don't know why, I'm not sure if there's a medical reason for it, but we operate at a high level of stress at an accelerated rate, and then one day we stop. And it's amazing how many times heart attacks happen and things go wrong in those first 2 years of retirement, because you've changed your whole way of being so quickly. And so just be careful that you don't do that. You've got to ease into things if you can.
Yeah, so many PowerPoints. I agree with all of them. It's such a dynamic space to work into. And you at a point in life where you have gained so much experience and skills and knowledge that chances are you can pivot from that. You don't have to have like a hard transition where you now stop everything and you sit on the stoop every day and watch the birds. You can if you want to, but probably if you are one of those high performing individuals, you're not going to like that. You're going to get bored and you're going to lose your sense of meaning and purpose. And yeah, I guess that's where the depression kicks in. So in this phase, you can start kind of positioning yourself for that transition and maybe take up some sort of hobby that you can continue with, so that when this transition happens, it's a more of a smoother ride into the new set of purpose, because you're not losing purpose when you retire, you're just redefining it. And that oftentimes mean becoming more involved in communities and paying it back, paying back your time or skills or experience, helping others. So if you lack purpose, probably the best place to start is just to give. Whether that is not necessarily always just money. Money is great, but if you can't, it's time, skills, just being involved and helping others develop. And I think there's plenty of opportunities for that. You don't have to search too far for it, but trying to find something that aligns with what you've done. I know of some people, especially like in the medical field, that never wants to stop working, because, and I don't know if that's because they really love what they do, or
Because they did terrible financial planning.
maybe that as well. But sometimes they've got more than enough to retire, but either they don't want to because they really love their job, and that's like, or they might be so scared of the position to be in to stop doing what they've always been done, and that they will lose that sense of purpose, and they can go into their 60s, 70s, hopefully not in their 80s if they have to operate, but that is something that is a real almost obstacle to overcome, and to start planning ahead for in this phase of life, on top of all the financial stuff. Again, we always say it's the it's a numbers game, and then it's a psychology, it's the emotional side, and we want to address both of them. And I guess there's plenty of other things to also think about at that point. That's just beyond the numbers. But I think those are the three main ones. It's usually children. That's a big one, and that influences a lot. Sense of meaning, and then it is the tangible stuff like the houses, the cars, the holiday homes that we need to make good informed decisions that involves more than just the numbers.
Yeah, no, and I think one thing I would say is if you're in a if you're married or with your children, one thing to do here is don't avoid the conversation.
Yes.
Brene Brown, who's really worth following, says to be clear is to be kind. And in a situation like this, be clear with your children or be clear with your spouse about what's important to you and maybe what's not important.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that if you have those conversations, especially with some time to retirement, where you can start to align with where you want to go. It's amazing. I can't believe how many times you talk to people that have been married for 25 years, and then you say, okay, so you guys are going to leave the city. Where are you going to go to? And then they say completely different things. One says to Dahlstrom, and the other one says to Pofadder, and you go like, okay, well those are quite different, and they're quite far apart. So you can't even like each individually stay in houses and visit. You know how are we doing this? So it's about having something to work towards, and maybe just there. This should be, if the money's okay, this should be probably the most rewarding, meaningful stage of life. And you've got so much time and experience. You've hopefully grown up. You've hopefully developed some wisdom. I'm still waiting for that, but it's coming apparently. And so you should be at a stage where you can derive a lot of enjoyment. So I wouldn't. I mean, I know we've spoken about harsh things now, about the things that go wrong, but equally. Catering for them and planning for them means that you give yourself the best opportunity to have, and you've used that word in this series, a quality of retirement. And high quality retirement doesn't require a lot of money; just requires some planning and some intent and some kind of clarity of purpose. And so for me, it starts with conversations, starts with being clear with yourself. Looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what is it that I want to do? And some people aren't charitable people, so maybe you do want to work for money. That's fine, but be honest about it. And you don't have to tell the world, but just with yourself. Like, I'm not going to do things for free because my time's valuable. I'm important. Whatever it is that you think. But don't do things that don't align with your purpose and your values. So if you are that person that wants to give and you mentorship and those kinds of things are desperately needed in this country and in the world now. So don't think that you don't have value. But if you want to keep earning, maybe you go into a scaled down where you work fewer hours, fewer days, etc. But I think there are plans, and certainly Warren Buffett showed us you can be fairly productive into your 80s and even your 90s. So don't be hopeless. If you don't have enough money or you just hate the idea of sitting at home doing nothing. But be clear with the people that are in your life about what you want to do and what you like to do, and then have a game plan. And execute.
And 65 is not the destination. It's not like you start watching a movie and okay, it's 2.5 hours long. I'm 10 minutes in. Okay, there's some action here. Halfway through, there's a plot twist. In the end, there's some surprise. All excitement, and now the movie ends, and now you're like, almost feel like I've been involved in this. I sometimes experience this with series. Like when the series ends, you're like, almost like feeling I'm missing out a piece of my life now. I don't watch that much series, but the ones that I do.
That's a good series.
And I almost think like retirement's almost like that, because we always have this thing in our mind when we talk about money. It's like retirement. We're planning for retirement. We're planning for the point where we become financially independent, which is great because we're humans. We like the challenge. We're building towards it. And then we reach it. We reach the top of the hill, the top of the mountain. And I was like, okay, but where's the fun now? Because I'm done with this. What's the next? So it's not the end destination. It's still part of the journey. You're just turning to the new chapter. You're starting the new book, in the book of opportunities for you. And to your point, some people will work for longer, which is absolutely fine. I probably also don't think I'm gonna stop working or want to stop working, and that could actually be a very important thing to keep in mind when you plan for retirement, because if you typically when we plan, we say we retire and we stop working completely when we do financial planning, but it might be you work for another 5 years or 10 years earning an income. It means you don't need to produce so much income from your investment. So you can maybe take a couple steps back now and maybe repurpose that money for something more meaningful and not have to invest so aggressively because you're in a position to continue working for another 5 or 10 years, which makes a massive difference on your kind of cash flow over your retirement. So I think to conclude the series, very, very almost complex life stage. I think a lot of moving parts, but it doesn't have to be like that. It could feel very overwhelming when you're into it, but it just starts with taking one step at a time, gaining clarity with what have you built up so far, what does the future look like, and then making informed decisions as you go. You still have time on your side. And there's no one straight rule. It's not like we're writing an exam and there's only one memo and you have to do it like this, otherwise you're wrong. There's many different paths that you can take. It's important for you just to get clarity and intention. I think that's intentional living. That's something we always come back to.
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Please send us your comments if you want us to kind of cover new topics or you've got some experiences around this. It's always great to share with the community.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this concludes this series. The next series, we're going to tackle the post-retiree. So finally, we're going to talk about that when you now have reached the age of retirement, so 65 or maybe early retirement. Now there are some new things to think about. What do we do with our money? So we're going to cover the technical side again, also the psychological side. So I'm quite excited about that. That's going to be a fun one. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The Honest Money podcast is brought to you by Prescient Investment Management. We consider everything to give you the advantage. It's the future of investing. Prescient Investment Management is an authorized FSP.